Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 415th episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work together to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org. Today on our podcast, we have someone who went from green lawns to green vegetables. We're talking with John Brubaker about micro-urban farming. John has been working on golf courses for over 35 years, since the age of 16. He planted thousands of trees and, just for fun, would typically have an organic vegetable garden on the golf course for the enjoyment of the customers and staff. Along the way, he earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Utah State University in Horticulture. In 2013, his wife and daughters developed some digestive issues, so he started growing his own vegetables, built a compost pile, implemented no-dig methods, planted for pollinators, introduced beneficial predator insects, and so on. Soon, he was giving vegetables to his neighbors, and he had become an urban farmer. In 2018, he named his micro farm Straw Hat, rented a booth at a farmer's market, and started selling organic produce. The success was beyond his expectations, incredibly rewarding, and now he is planning on retiring from the golf course and going into urban farming. Welcome to the show today, John. Are you ready to rock?
I certainly am. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at today?
Yeah, I think I can. The timeline on all of this stuff is kind of blurry because I didn't actually set out to become an urban farmer. I just wanted to grow more food so the family, my wife and I and our daughters could have, fresh produce that was pesticide free. Mm-hmm. And I quickly found out that the adrenaline rush of growing the vegetables as the organic process started working with the composts and minimized input and things was, it was quite a rush.
Yeah.
And so I just sort of started to expand it. And as the fire got fueled more and more, I started very small and with 20 beds, 25 foot by 30 inches.
Wow.
And yeah, well, and I was in a good situation because it was relatively, there weren't the financial pressures that a lot of people start urban farming with. It was just an opportunity for me to use my education, my experience, and my time in trying to develop a model that would fit my context and what I needed it to fulfill.
The interesting thing about most people that grow food is this is like their second thing they do. They all, everybody else has something else that we do along the way. And it sounds like you're fitting into that model.
Yeah. I was really surprised at the farmer's market, just how many people are interested in having fresh local vegetables. Mm-hmm. It was really staggering. And it's caused me to take a hard look at this and look at expansion of the process. I think I'm going to try to get up to 4,000 square feet or 4,500 square feet next year. Uh-huh. I'm going to run out of compost. I got to do something about the compost issue, but I'll find a way.
Yeah.
And you want to minimize the inputs, I think. And that's everybody talks about the sustainability of it, I think, and the regenerative, and those two words kind of get put back and forth, and some say regenerative is the word, sustainable is not enough. And geez, I like to look at them as kind of a both kind of a thing.
Oh, yes.
Because regenerative kind of, to me, refers to the soil and the planet. And sustainability, I mean, we live in a capitalist, for good or for bad, we live in a capitalist society, and so at very least it's got to be financially sustainable.
Oh, yes. In permaculture, definitely financially sustainable is a piece of the pie. If it's not, and in nature, financially sustainable is it putting enough fruit off? And we both know that there's a tremendous amount of abundance that comes out of our gardens.
Oh, geez, I'll tell you what, I was flabbergasted at how quickly my yields started to increase in my little micro farm that I was basically for all I was just experimenting around and see what happened. And the yields got up there really high, really quickly. And, after the first year, this last year in 2018, I actually stopped I didn't have any fertilizer inputs at all other than the compost going onto the soil.
Right.
And I found, and I hope my yields continue to increase on that, because it will make all the, it keeps those internal costs down.
Oh, yeah.
And makes it more sustainable for the model I'm trying to develop.
Exactly. Well, if you believe Elaine Ingham, she's been on our show a couple of times.
Yeah, I know.
She says that if you get the right microbial balance in the soil, you don't have to fertilize.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of Elaine's, Dr. Ingham's stuff, and listened to your podcast and it seems to be just spot on, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
I think it's complicated beyond my knowledge base, that's for sure.
Or maybe,
but as long as I can make it work, I'm not. I don't need to be afraid of it.
Exactly. I was going to say, or maybe it's just a matter of, building enough organic matter and compost in your soils until they self-heal, and add compost every year.
Yeah, and then try to get out of the way.
Yes,
because it's remarkable what happens if you just kind of not do. You can stop and not try to fix it, and it seems to work wonderfully.
Yeah, exactly. So how did this whole vegetable thing happen for you? Because you said it's kind of a blur along the way. What happened?
Well, of course, my wife and youngest daughter, they started having some digestive issues. Celiac is what the issue that came about, and so we had to abandon all breads.
Mm-hmm.
And celiac is an autoimmune problem. So being in the green industry for all these years, I know that a lot of the pesticides on the target pest you're trying to deal with, gets onto their immune system. And so it occurred to me that if you grew vegetables without any pesticides on, you'd probably be a little bit ahead of the game.
You think?
And yeah, kind of crazy, right? So that's what I started trying to do, and I don't use anything. I don't even use the organic approved pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
I use insect nettings, and I put lacewings in there to chew on the bugs and ladybugs, and I even brought in some praying mantis this year. I didn't bring them in, but they kind of showed up. And
it's amazing when you let it alone. You said it earlier. When you let it alone, it's amazing how nature just handles this stuff.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to in my reading and stuff like that as lazy gardening, and I wouldn't call it lazy gardening. I wouldn't apply lazy to it at all.
Uh-huh.
I would just say amazing gardening, more like, because if you just don't try to fix it, I'm really surprised at what can happen.
Yeah,
pleasantly surprised too.
So can you kind of give me an idea of what you grow on a month-to-month basis?
Sure. What I grow for the market and what I grow for the home they're not different things, but some of the things I grow for the home I don't take to market.
Uh-huh.
Like, I like to grow artichokes. I like to grow cantaloupe, and they're wonderful. We just eat those until the cows come home. But for the market, I do a lot of the greens. I do the kales and the spinaches, some lettuces, beets, radishes, things like that. I grew some glass gem corn this year.
Oh, nice.
And I took it to the market just as more of a decoration, to decorate, because it's just gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
But I had people coming by and just saying, what do I do with this? And I said, well, it's popcorn, so give it a go. I sold it like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And people just ate it up. And so I'll probably do it again. I did save 4 or 5 cobs for my own seeds.
Oh, good.
And, yeah. Well, it's amazing. That little seed 6 weeks later, you have a 10-foot tall plant in your front yard.
I know, isn't that amazing?
And, and the neighbors come by and they kind of shake their head. But that's okay. They can shake their head all they want.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting that you say that. I have a photograph of me sitting in my front yard. It's a magazine cover from about 12 years ago from the Scottsdale Times. And it says, with me sitting cross-legged in my front yard with corn in back of me, it says green extreme. But would you want to be neighbors with this quirky tree hugger?
Well, anybody who answers that question honestly is like, well, yeah, because they're going to have food.
Food, right.
They're going to have really good food.
Yeah, exactly.
But all in all, I have about 22 different things that I grow. And I'm probably going to, I will whittle that down over time.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, it's really just a giant journey, right? I will try to grow what people want and try to grow it the best I can and make it regenerative and sustainable and everything else all in one move. A model that's scalable. That's one of the important things of what I'm trying to do.
Well, one of the regenerative things that you're doing is saving your own seeds. That's huge.
Yeah. Well, I've listened to you and Bill McDornan.
Oh, yes.
Talk about it on a monthly basis or every other month.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
Once a month.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful way to, get things that are growing well in your area, your microclimate. And, it seems to make a big difference.
It absolutely makes a big difference. You bet.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one time talking about a parsley that you have.
Oh, yes.
That you've been growing in your place for years, and now it's basically
a weed in my yard.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful weed to have, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of a superfood weed.
Right. Once you plant open pollinated seeds, you let them go to seed, they just replant themselves year after year. And I have basil and parsley and cowpeas and nasturtiums and lettuce and garlic and onions that all just come back. And there's many more things out there too, but it just comes back year after year after year.
And I've saved the onion seeds. I've saved Hale's Best Jumbo Cantaloupe seeds, tomatoes. And, that's an area where I'm going to expand what I'm trying to do for sure, because if they grow well in my yard, then they grow well in my yard, and that's what I need.
Yeah. So you've been selling at a farmer's market. Have you thought about selling to chefs?
Well, I don't think that I've entertained that at this point, mostly because I want to scale this the right way. I don't want this to overtake my life, and I can easily see how it could.
Right?
You could get doing this 60, 70 hours a week and never get done if you just jumped in with both feet. And I've heard so many people say that they did this much, they did an acre and a half, they did 2 acres, and they found that they were working 80 hours a week just to try to keep up on it.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I want to go the other way. I want to sneak up on it.
I like that.
And see where it goes, so that I can pick the stop point.
Right.
And I can say, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
I don't need to go any further.
So when I was at college, I went back to college late in life from 99 to 06. And from about 99 to 04, I raised food in my front and backyards. And I went to the market every week. And then all the leftovers would go to a friend of mine that owned a restaurant. And what I found in doing that process was that chefs were a bit easier than farmers markets, because I could just grow what I grew and then I'd take it to them. And it was kind of all one fell swoop. So, I did both of them, both the market and the chefs, but I kind of defaulted to the chefs later on.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that could easily be the case for me, right? There's a number of avenues of this process that I haven't explored yet.
Mm-hmm.
Chefs are one of them. The seed saving is just getting going. There's a whole big pie of things that you can do to try to make this work. And I've just taken a couple of bites, I think, in my own mind. That's
the fun part of this. There's so much to explore. And I mean, what do you want to do?
Right.
There's medicinal herbs, there's culinary herbs, there's vegetables, there's, hey, you want to make kale chips? There's, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and you can go just about anywhere you want to go with it. And your health is at the center of it on the back end, right? I mean,
big time.
And the people that you're delivering the food to, their health is on the back end of that. I think it's important too that commercial agriculture that, boy, we really we really need to take a look at that and say, okay, maybe that's not quite right.
Right.
If we can do things better locally, there was a product just in the news about a giant recall, and gee whiz.
Lettuce.
Maybe, yeah, romaine lettuce. And maybe locally is a better solution, a better answer.
I know for me, locally and from my backyard is a better solution, and it sounds like that's the case for you too.
Yeah. It's we really enjoy it, and we've learned quite a lot about preserving foods, and not a ton, but pickling onions, beets, things like that.
Well,
and then of course tomatoes.
Yeah, you kind of have to once you have all of this abundance.
Right.
It's like, what do you do with it all?
Yeah. So we bought a blancher a couple of years ago, the broccoli, blanching the broccoli.
Oh, yeah.
Holy cow. I mean, it's just head after head of broccoli that got blanched a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. You just store it in the freezer?
Yeah, we stored it in the freezer. I vacuum seal it and store it in the freezer. And, basically it will last us all winter. I do our own pesto, those kind of things. Yeah, right? I mean, golly, homemade pesto is terrific. Anybody out there who hasn't tried homemade pesto, I just think that should be, they should just call it a food group.
Right, exactly.
And just say, okay, homemade pesto is a food group.
Yeah.
It just tastes differently than anything you can get out of a bottle.
Oh my God. Understatement. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to kind of explore something, because this whole thing about going to a farmer's market, it can be a little bit of a stop point for people. How did that process work for you?
I mean, it worked really well. I had no problems at the farmer's market. I mean, I went to the website. Our local Wheeler's Farm is the market that I go to. Uh-huh. And I went to their website after the first of the years. They were having a meeting where they got all the potential vendors together, and they go over the rules, and they say, well, you know, this and this and this. And the nice part about the fresh vegetable market is the rules aren't, they're not stringent.
Right.
They kind of stay out of your way. As long as you don't claim that they're washed and ready to eat, mm-hmm. The USDA will kind of leave you alone. And so, when you put that on the bag tag, this isn't washed, it's not ready to eat, and you're good to go. In terms of the market itself, gosh, it was a Sunday market, and I would go down there an hour early and get it all set up, and I'd work until 2:00 in the afternoon, and the people, the other vendors, and the people that were there were wonderful.
It's a community on its own, isn't it? A really cool one.
Oh, man, it's fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I would have long conversations with people about the vegetables that I'm growing, and I have 4 or 5 people standing in line.
Isn't that nice?
I was there all alone, so I don't know how nice it was. I don't recall if they left or not, but I would like to get them their food faster. And yeah. So I'm going to work on some things in that regard. And if they want to email me and tell me what they want, I will have it waiting for them when they get there. Because, everybody's time is valuable these days.
Yeah.
So you try to respect it as much as you can.
Absolutely. And that, what you just said, wow, that would be a really cool way to connect with customers. You have a list for the next week and have people pre-order stuff and have it available and waiting for them at the market. Yeah,
just have an emailer and just, tell them, send them out a fresh sheet of what you have and let them pick.
Yep.
And have it available for them when they get there. And that way, they're in and out in just a couple of minutes. And, I know that we all stand in line at the grocery store, and that's hard enough. If you go to the farmer's market, usually you're on a tight schedule because you do have to go. And so you want to get them in and out as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Convenience. And they're paying a premium price. You pay more at farmer's market than you do at the grocery store.
Right.
I personally think you get a whole lot better product. You still do pay more, and people do have a little bit of heartache about that sometimes.
Well, and it's fresher and it's more nutritious. Oh, yeah. And your farmer, and just go for it. That's what I say. Just go for it. Yeah, right. Yeah. And I'm going to continue doing that. What a good experience it was. And I have people that refer to me as their go-to farmer. Nice. That's kind of a reward that I didn't really see coming in this process, is when somebody says something like that to you, and you just kind of go, well, crap. Now I have responsibility. Yeah, but not responsibility like a problem. No, not a problem. Responsibility to make sure that I get them the best products that I can. Yeah, and that's a really good thing. Oh, that's quite a rush. That really is. So one of the things I love about this conversation is your enthusiasm. I've been a grower for a long time, and this is kind of a new rabbit hole that I went down a few years ago.
And there's a lot of fun down here.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by the interest. I'm overwhelmed by how much I can produce in a really small spot. And, people have come before me that have kind of laid it out for us, where you can do a very high intensity rotation on your plants, and you can produce a tremendous amount of food.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, right? I would like to see everybody in our neighborhood doing that very thing.
Right?
Because I think that overall everybody's health would be better. And plus, if I could get them to grow a few things that, I'm not growing, maybe I could trade them.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I noticed when I was in Europe, I was in Europe in 2004 for 3 weeks, and I was in Europe in 2014 for 2 weeks. And one of the things I noticed is that pretty much every yard had food growing in it. And one of the strange things for me here in Phoenix is that virtually no yards have food growing in them.
Yeah, I don't know how it is in Phoenix, but up here we have city ordinances. They kind of bother me, where you have to have so much of your yard has to be grass.
Aye.
And I'm a grass guy, right? I've been a grass guy for a long time. But I'm looking at that going, we don't have enough water to do that.
Yeah.
This is the desert.
Yeah, and we're going to see that more and more over the course of the next decade or two. I think that there's going to be water shortages, and we need to wake up.
Yeah, and use the mulches and use the biological principles of regenerative agriculture to get us where we need to be.
Yeah.
And you can still have a little grass to sit on. It doesn't have to be. It's not a yes or a no. There's a lot of gray area in between. Maybe minimize the grass a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big proponent of don't plant something unless you can eat it or it supports your edibles. And as you said, in your composting, the grass is part of that process.
Yeah. Yeah. If I don't put the grass clippings back onto the existing grass, I catch it and put it into the compost pile.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, and grass is a great harvester of nutrients out of the soil.
Oh, sure.
So why bag it up and throw it away, wherever away is?
Right. Yeah, wherever away is. That's a good point. And and I don't use any synthetic chemicals on my yard. I haven't in a number of years. And so I feel like it's safe for the vegetables and safe for the goals that I'm trying to accomplish in the garden. So I put it in the compost pile. Makes perfect sense to me. Along with the coffee grounds and, all of the other carbon-based things that can be decomposed.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I was going to mention earlier, one of the ways that I went from not producing enough compost to having enough compost for my gardens is I started collecting food waste from a local restaurant. And I get 10 buckets of food waste a week from this local restaurant, and it goes to the worm bin. Some of it goes to the worm bin, some of it goes to the chickens, some of it goes to my soldier fly experiment that I keep experimenting with. But a big bulk of it goes into the compost bins. And now all of a sudden, I'm a year into this and we get enough compost for our garden beds now.
Well, you know what? That's something I'm going to have to look at and see what I can get going there. Because if that flipped the switch for you, because I am a little short of compost.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to be. Let's put it that way. And rather than have it hauled in from somewhere, I'd just as soon
make it on site.
Produce as much as I can, right? Yeah, much as I can right here on site. It's the circle thing. You try to close the circle is what I'm trying to do. Make it a self-sustaining closed circle system.
Right. The cool thing this year is I had enough compost for my gardens. I just used the pallet method where you stack pallets on their sides and you have a cube 4x4x4. And, there you go.
Yeah. Do you just a couple inches of compost around your stuff?
Yep. Basically, I add it right on top. I don't dig. I'm a no-till guy as well.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in that. Don't touch it. It's living. Leave it alone.
Right. Well, Kari Spencer, she's one of my business partners and friends and one of the teachers here. She says, if you till your garden, it would be like going down a street of houses with a big piece of equipment and just running over the houses. That's what it does to the soil. So, I've listened to Elaine and everybody enough to know that you don't want to disturb the soil.
And so the main thing that I try to do is I try to dig as small a hole as I possibly can to plant the transplants,
Right.
Just don't bother. And it's always in the 2 inches of compost that I've just put on.
Yeah.
And so I'm not getting down into the soil that's been there for a while because the way I look at it, there's probably a fungal community, hopefully a fungal community going on down there that's just basically doing my work for me.
Right.
And that just seems like a real good idea to me.
Yeah. And,
I can concentrate on other things.
Yeah, you said that. I want to do a shout out about this because I get, in fact, in the past couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of emails from people. Oh my gosh, I got this fungus stuff growing in my mulch around my trees. It's like, yes, leave it alone.
Beautiful.
Right. That's a good thing. So mushrooms and fungus in your yard is good.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. What's the statistic? It's like 95% of the fungal community is beneficial. 99, something like it's a huge number. Huge. And that's just what they know, right? I mean, this is a great big open door that it hasn't been that long ago. They didn't even know what they were looking at.
Right. Yeah. So leave the soil structure alone. So I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
My failures are kind of a daily, I would say, event.
Excellent.
And I don't mind failure. I really don't, because I think if you can adjust your course a little bit because you've missed the mark on something, you're going to be ahead the next time that comes up.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest failure is my struggle in trying to communicate what I know to be factual regarding the microfarming, the composting, the organic inputs only. I seem to struggle delivering that message. And so and that's an area where I'm just going to keep working on. And I don't know if it's the delivery that I use or the tone or just the message itself is just, not what it ought to be.
Yeah.
And so that's an area that I just keep working on.
Yeah. Well, and the good news is that the more you do it, the better you get, the more you do it.
Well, and that's certainly what I hope it will be. And I hope one day to tell people this story that I'm on and they go, well, gee whiz, that's cool. How can I get to doing that? That's what I'm hoping for.
Cool. So what do you consider your biggest success?
This is one that my wife, Catherine, had a little fun with me about. She said, tell him it's your straw bale potatoes.
Oh, tell me about those.
Straw bales. When you have horses, you have a lot of straw. You have a lot of hay left over. And, because it gets wet.
Oh, yeah.
You can't really feed it to the horses because they get sick. And so I hang on to it. And what I do is I take it out in the springtime and wet it down with water really heavily and put a couple inches of compost on the top of it and water it every other day for 10 days, put a thermometer in there, and it'll get up to about 130 degrees, 135, and start to decompose. And when it starts to cool down, I plant potatoes in it. The potatoes just come out, they just grow like crazy. They come out wonderfully. The yields probably aren't what they would be if you did it in the soil, but you use that hay that's basically would be, a garbage or a waste product.
A waste product, yep.
And at the end of the year, I can cut the strings on that and spread that around the garden, and I've got myself a decomposed mulch. So works out pretty good. But that's not my biggest success. My biggest success is my daughters.
Yeah.
I mean, they're far and away, and they've been so supportive of, although they do give me the eyebrow look every once in a while, like, you're doing what? But they've been really supportive, and they're great, and I don't know what I'd do without them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I used to get the eyebrow look from my dad. My dad always wanted me to go out and get a real job. And it's like, Dad, this is my real job. Yeah. And, as he aged and got to the end of his life, he couldn't tell me enough of how proud he was of me. So,
well, and that's the thing, right? So, when you get the eyebrow look from somebody you're close to, you're either crazy or you're onto something.
Right.
And so, hopefully I'm onto something.
I think we're onto something big here because,
oh, absolutely.
Everybody's got to eat. And the most important thing that we can be doing right now, in my opinion, is figuring out where our food comes from and growing it. So,
yeah, I would agree 100% with that comment right there.
So what drives you?
Well, there's a series of issues that drives me. After years of using the synthetic fertilizers and the chemicals, and I have found that I've been wrong for a long, long time. They don't need to be used. There are other ways to do it. And going into food production seems like the right approach, because the fact that we have hungry people in this country, that just appalls me.
Yeah.
It appalls me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a reason in the world that we should have. There shouldn't be anybody hungry in this country. There shouldn't be anybody hungry in the world.
Right.
We just got to work on our systems a little bit and get that down.
Or teach them how to grow food.
Teach them how to grow food, and that's kind of that's what's driving me. I want to get something that I can put down on paper that, okay, if you follow this recipe and adapt it to your climate, your micro area, you ought to be able to grow all the food you need.
Mm-hmm.
That's the long goal, right? I've heard you talk about your long goal is to solve the food problem for the entire
planet
world, or is it this?
No, let's might as well go with the planet.
Yeah, see, your goal's a lot bigger than mine is. I just want to create a model.
Yeah, good. Well, and really that's what it is for me. I'm not going to do this work myself. I'm just putting structures in place that people are inspired by and say, just like you. You jump in and you're inspired and you're doing this work and other people are seeing it and they get inspired and then they do it.
And that's the idea, right? I mean, that's what we're doing this for, because that will solve the problem. I mean, the big governments aren't going to solve the problems. Or they don't appear to be willing to solve the problems. So it's going to have to be solved at a small local level with individuals starting small and growing it up.
Us doing the work. That's right. So if you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be and why?
Can I recommend a couple of things?
Sure.
One's a book, one's a podcast. The book, of course, is Teaming with Microbes by Jeff Lowenfels and Wayne Lewis.
Oh, yes.
Where it's just an outstanding book to help you get a grasp on what is going on beneath your feet and how you really need to respect it more than maybe we do.
Mm-hmm.
I've read that book repeatedly, and every time I read it, I grab something new out of it and go, well, yep, I didn't have that worked into the equation, but maybe I should. And then the second thing is a podcast. It's, of course, there's your podcast, but there's one podcast out there that I listened to, I think it was in 2016. It was a Radio Lab podcast, and the guest was a lady named Dr. Suzanne Simard from the University of British Columbia. And the podcast is called From Tree to Shining Tree. And it's a podcast that I recommend to everybody because it describes the forest floor and what's going on in the forest floor and how important that is to every breath of air that we take.
Oh, yes.
And, if anybody has 30 minutes of time where they're not doing a whole lot and they just want to put their microphones in or their earplugs in and listen to a podcast, that is one that potentially that's a game changer for people.
Yeah.
If they would just listen to that one and go, well, I didn't realize that.
So the podcast is called From Tree to Shining Tree?
From Tree to Shining Tree.
And the episode was with Dr. Suzanne
Simard, Simard.
All right. I'm going to go listen to it. Oh, yeah.
You should. I mean, it's terrific. It is really something.
Cool. And what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
If you want to get into something like this, if you see something that bothers you or you think you want to be a part of, just go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, start small. Start small. Don't quit your day job, as they say, right away. Get your feet wet, see what it's like, and kind of build it. And it'll work. It'll work because if you have the knowledge base is out there. I mean, gee whiz, there's knowledge everywhere with the internet.
Oh my
both
God,
good
yes.
and bad.
Yes.
And so you got to, even with all of this information out there, you've got to kind of sort through it and apply what you can to your climate, your situation. Because, you could, in my situation, growing vegetables, I can drive a mile from my house and the microclimate is entirely different.
Right.
And so what you always have to do is you have to think about what you're doing, but don't be afraid to go ahead and think.
Right.
It won't hurt a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, John.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Loved the conversation today. So how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website and an Instagram and a Facebook page, and they're all, and an email, and they're all the same. The email is strawhaturbanfarm@gmail.com, and Facebook is Straw Hat Urban Farm, Instagram Straw Hat Urban Farm, and the website is all strawhaturbanfarm.com. And
beautiful.
Just drop me. Yeah, I got them all. It's such a long name that nobody bothered with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just drop me a line. Let me know what you think and any improvements that anybody's got in mind for me. Boy, I would sure love to hear them.
Yeah.
Because this is a great adventure and I'm having a blast.
Nice. You can also find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/straw hat. We are your urban farming resource. You can find our podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and every place that podcasts are found. Also visit urbanfarm.org to find articles, webinars, courses, and more. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Claiming your inner urban farmer is easy. Grow food, share it, and name your farm. Then let the world know you're an urban farmer while supporting our podcast. Pick up your Urban Farmer bling, hats, and t-shirts at imanurbanfarmer.com.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.